When you're out flying in a small plane, something you never want to have happen is this. It seems this pilot made a big mistake and flew directly into some power lines. But let's see how he got there. First, I want to talk about that horn that you heard as soon as he rotated until he hit the power lines. Listen here as the horn starts making a noise. That noise is the stall warning horn, and what that indicates is that the wings are about to stop being able to generate enough lift, and the last thing you want to do is have that stall warning horn go off when you're really close to the ground. When your plane is flying like this, the wings are not generating the same amount of lift to get you away from the ground because it's in a steep bank like this. It even looks like he may be descending, and clearly this did not work out. The easiest way I can explain this lift to you from a wing is when you're a kid and you put your hand out the window. When you put your hand out the window, if you were to have it like this, the wind is going to be hitting the bottom of your hand, and that's going to want to push your hand up. However, if you had your hand like this, the wind is not going to be pushing your hand up at that same amount of force that you had when you had your hand like this. That same concept applies to how he has his wings here. Now, I know some of you are not going to believe me, as some of you don't think I'm a real pilot, but if you do go try that, just make sure you have someone else driving while you're trying all these different hand angles, because I don't want you to get into a wreck and then you tell the police, yeah, this fake YouTuber pilot Kelsey told me to go try this thing while I'm driving my car. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, you have your hand out the window, you'll notice how the force is on your hand when it's like this compared to this, and it's the same thing that's going on with this pilot. By being in that steep bank, he's not generating the same amount of lift as he should be. With the stall warning horn going off and the pilot choosing to do this excessive angle of bank, you can see why he isn't getting away from the ground. Now, I had a very similar situation to this once when I was flying a small plane just like this at a very high altitude airport, and we took off and the stall warning horn was going off the entire time. Now, I knew exactly what was going on, and I also understood, or I think I understood, it was a long time ago, I also understood that concept that we can't get into a steep bank, because if we do, we're going to stop generating lift, and we were low to the ground because we had just taken off. So I made nice shallow banks so we could keep climbing because we were near a mountainous area. So I made this nice shallow bank until I could continue to climb and get away and higher as far as the altitude that I needed in towards this valley area that we were going to. And you will notice that commercial airliners, like on the 747, I'd say 99% of the time when we take off, before we make any turn, we're at least 400 feet above the ground. And the reason is because they know that when you're close to the ground, you have things like telephone poles and power lines and buildings and trees. All those things are close to the ground. So they want you to get at least 400 feet before they have you start any turn. Now, of course, there are exceptions to every rule, and that is something that we brief. If there's some turn that's going to happen like at the very edge of the runway before you get to 400 feet, that is something that we talk about. And we talk about that because it's abnormal. So pilots generally, when they're flying commercial airliners, will always go out of, let's say Los Angeles, LAX. You're going to be at 400 feet before you start any turn. The soonest they'll have you turn when you go out, if you're not on a normal departure, is to wait for you to get to the shoreline. By the shoreline, you should be at least 400 feet, even when you're heavy and it's hot. So you can get to 400 feet, and out there it's ocean. So it's kind of hard to hit something over the ocean. But by waiting to 400 feet, they're avoiding this situation right here. A friend of mine that's a helicopter pilot told me a piece of advice that I'll always remember. And I noticed something happening in this video that's based on what she had told me. And that is, if you're ever flying and your body starts to tense up, trust your gut. Realize that there's probably something that's not right, and you should make a choice, make a decision, do something, look around, try to figure out why your body's tensing up. If you're leaning forward or you're feeling that in your gut, something's not right, trust your gut. You can see right before this pilot hits, I think he realizes something's about to go wrong because you can see his body start to tense up here and his shoulders start to scrunch up. I'm going to guess this is an inexperienced pilot and he made a poor choice. And the reality is that being a pilot, the main thing you have to do is make good choices. This was a poor choice because he got into this Top Gun bank just a couple hundred feet above the ground and did not work out very well for him. This is actually the second part of the video, and you can see how it played out here.
Gezet, gezet.
Okay, kom. Oeh, fuck. Oeh, fuck.
Ja.
Is he okay? Wat het gebeurd? Is he okay?
Ik weet niet.
Despite that lady having blood on her face, she looks like she's physically okay, and the other guy seems okay, and the pilot seemed okay. Now, had that pilot maintained wings level and got to 500 feet before he turned, he probably would have been okay. This is the picture here of the plane after it all went down. Over here on the left side of the pictures, you can see some power lines. I'm guessing this plane hit the other ones that were on the other side of these trees and then actually hit the trees, cushioning the impact. But you can see just how beat up this plane is. And this just goes to show you that even though these planes look like little tin cans with lawnmower engines, it still can take a massive beating and you can walk away. And that's why I always tell pilots, if you're ever in a situation where things look really bad, keep fighting and get yourself to the best possible situation. Don't give up, because this pilot didn't have a choice. As soon as he hit the electrical lines, the party was over. But there's a lot of cases where I've seen pilots where they give up. Their engine fails and they just go, oh, well, now it's all over. No, look how smashed up that plane is, and those three people walked away. Had he ended up killing someone, I'm sure he would have felt terrible, but all three people walked away. That's a mistake that I'm sure if he ends up flying again, he will never make that mistake again. And I just want to show this to you because it's something you can learn from. Don't think because you got your 50 hours that you're some Top Gun pilot and do something like this. Learn from this situation. This is an Argentinian private jet, and before I started reviewing this, I decided to double check and verify that because I've made that mistake before, but I was just in Argentina and I was pretty sure, but I had to verify. As you can see here, this LV indicates that the plane is registered in Argentina. As you can see, that isn't a normal profile that you will typically see a plane doing, and the person that sent it to me, they asked me, is this unsafe or dangerous, or why did the plane do this? That looked more like when you're in flight school and you're learning how to do a soft or short field takeoff, you do this thing where you try to get the plane off the ground as quickly as possible, and then you go right over the runway and speed up. And the reason you do that is you want to get the plane, obviously, off the runway. If it's a very short field runway, you want to get it off of the runway and in the air, then you can speed up and then climb away from the ground. That's kind of what it looked like they were doing here, which is not normal in a private jet. You'll see planes doing this all the time if you hang out near an airport where people are doing flight school, but you almost never see it on a corporate jet. Have I done this in a 747? Well, yes, I have. I did it in a simulator, not in real life. But I did this exact same situation. We did something where we did a short takeoff. I just wanted to try something out. We did this really short takeoff where we did exactly this exact situation, where you get up in the air and then you'd hold your altitude, speed up, and then once you get enough speed that you would normally climb away from the ground at, you would climb away from the ground. The thing is you saw this pilot actually start to lose altitude. You see here the pilot is actually losing altitude, which is not something that you want to do just after takeoff. So one possibility is that this pilot was just messing around doing a short or soft field type takeoff. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that they accidentally bumped the power back, or they were just playing around. I mean, there's a whole multitude of possibilities here. But the thing is, I don't think that these pilots or the people that were on board were ever at any risk, because you can see here that their climb out was very strong. So it's not like the plane didn't have enough power to get up and fly away. So whoever sent it to me, you are correct. This is not normal, but I don't think that anybody was in danger. I think the pilots were either messing around and having some fun or trying something different, or maybe I did the 747 thing in a simulator. Maybe they don't have a simulator, so they wanted to see, hey, if we're ever in a scenario where we need to get off at a really short distance, let me just show you what this plane is capable of. Now, except for the part where they started descending a little bit, which, again, they didn't get close to the ground, but they did start to descend. But other than that, there's really no danger in doing that way, but it's not a normal profile that you'll see pilots do.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Sound right, boy.
You've heard me talk about crosswind landings before, but essentially what it means is the wind is not coming directly down the middle of the runway. It's coming from the side, which means the plane is approaching the runway at an angle, and we call that crabbing. And when you see a plane like a 747 with this angle on it, it's a pretty decent amount of crab. Now, there are two different strategies that pilots can take when they're doing a crosswind landing. My style, the way that I like to do it, is that I wait till I'm 10 feet off the ground, then I push the rudder in and straighten the plane out. And I just found that for me, that works out better, and that's the reason why I do it that way. I also think it's smoother for the passengers, but for me, it's just an overall easier system. It's the way that I've always flown planes. I've always landed without having any crab in there, just because it also is easier on the landing gear. It's easier for the people in the back of the plane, so their face isn't getting slapped onto a window if they're looking out the window. But a plane like this can handle landing in the crosswind exactly like you saw. One of the nice things about a plane landing in the crab like this is that your plane is going to track right down the middle of the runway. And it's a lot easier to keep it tracking, and you don't need to worry about when to push the rudder in. But watch what happens to the right wing. As they land, it comes up, which of course causes the left wing to dip. There's two reasons that can be created. The first is that the pilots are focused on now having to straighten out the rudder. Now that they landed on the runway, they're having to, we call it dancing on the rudders. You're going back and forth, trying to get the plane to keep down the middle of the runway. Obviously, that's the priority, is keeping the plane going down the middle of the runway, especially on a wide body aircraft like this, because there's not a lot of room for error. You can't go to the left or the right, or you're going to be on runway lights or into the grass, and you never want to have that. The other thing that can happen is that by doing that, by being focused on the rudder, you can leave your ailerons, or in this case your yoke, neutral. And what that allows to happen is that the wind now comes underneath that right wing, because the wind is coming from that right hand side, and blows that right wing up in the air, causing the left wing to go towards the ground. That's one possibility. The other possibility is realize how much further this right wing now has to travel forward rapidly to get with the plane being straight. And what happens when a wing starts moving forward, especially a wingtip, which is really far away from the main center of the plane, that means it's traveling a long distance and it's traveling very fast. Well, a wing going forward is going to generate lift, which is exactly what happened. The plane is coming into the runway crabbed like this. And as soon as they touch down, look at the distance this right wingtip is going to have to travel in order to get even with the rest of the plane, because it's a long way back. So you have one side generating lift and one side not generating lift. And if you don't put the correction in, what you have is wind coming from that side, and you have a wing generating more lift than another wing, which means it's going to want to go up in the air, pushing the other wing down. So my guess is the reason this left wing is coming down here is probably because they didn't put any correction into that right wing. When I say correction, what I mean is that as soon as your plane touches down, you're not done flying. The plane's still going just a couple of knots slower than it needs to actually fly. So you have to put a correction into your wings to keep your wings level. And you have to turn them, basically like if you were going to bank your plane to the right, you'd have to turn the controls to keep that right wing actually level. It's kind of counterintuitive. So as soon as you land, you now have to bank your right wing down so it doesn't go up. And it takes a lot. You got your feet moving, you got your eyes keeping down the middle of the runway, and now you have to keep your wings level, especially on a large jet like this. On a smaller plane, not a big deal. As the planes get bigger, those engines, we call them pods, are now really close to the ground. So as soon as you land, you have to put that correction in. But you can't go all the way to the right, because if you go all the way to the right, you've now slammed your right wing into the ground. And if you just do nothing, you can slam your left wing into the ground. So you have to do, just like every flight instructor says that I hate, you have to do just enough to keep the wings level, which is an annoying thing. Usually I just get a little bit in there and then I just kind of add more as necessary. You want to obviously start with some as soon as you touch down, and then you can kind of fill it out. Now, as you slow down, it's not an issue, but at that very high speed, those first few seconds, it's vital that you get enough in there so that way you don't slam your right wing down or let your right wing go up, slamming your left wing on the ground. And that is why I don't like to crab like this. I have a different rhythm, which is at 10 feet, which is right about here when they start to float. I put in enough rudder to straighten out the plane. Now, before I talk about why they floated, I'll tell you that the other possible scenario here is that the pilot put in the wrong wing correction. Now, I talked about that you were supposed to put your right wing down towards the ground. There's a possibility that this pilot, for whatever reason, got confused and put his left wing down. Raise your hand if you've done that before. And I did it, but I caught it before it became a problem. But I had very similar situation to this. We landed, and then for whatever reason, my brain malfunctioned, and I thought left wing down. And as soon as I did that, I was like, well, nope, that's definitely not it. And then I got right wing down. So I was able to correct it before I ended up striking a pod, and obviously these guys didn't strike pods either. So I was able to correct it before it was a problem, and you can see that the correction was put in pretty quickly. But the thing is you don't want to have it get that close because it gets very stressful for everybody up there on the flight deck. Now let me talk about why they floated a little bit right before they touched down. You see here how they're floating a little bit before the touchdown? That's not something that you want to have happen. The problem is that when you're coming in on a day like this, where the wind is probably gusty, you need to keep in extra speed. And the problem is when you have extra speed is that speed has to bleed off somewhere before the plane touches down. So usually what I do when it's really windy and it's a strong gusty day like that is I don't try to make it a soft landing, especially because on my strategy at 10 feet above the runway, I straighten the plane out. If I try to straighten the plane out and now make a really soft touchdown and just kind of like goose it on the ground, I have the possibility of floating. And by floating and keeping the plane straight down the runway with a strong crosswind like that, it can actually blow the plane to the left side of the runway. So as soon as I straighten out here with this wind from this right-hand side, this plane is now off the center of the runway. And you never want to land off the center line, especially on a larger jet. If you enjoyed this video, check out these two over here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.